Everyone. My name is Janelle, and this is Mindful Nurses Wellness Wednesday, and we're really happy to have everyone coming today. Please just type into the chat where you're coming from, and if you have any questions for us today, we'd be happy to chat with you as we go through the session. And today we have Carina with us sharing about mindful communication, and we're really happy to have her here. She's the host of Connected Curious Care. Have I got that right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Connected Curious Care and a podcast. And is a nurse herself with a background in public health and behavioral sciences and communication techniques. So we're really excited to have her sharing with us some communication techniques. We haven't had any guest speakers sharing about that yet. And it's so important as we are working with burnout to be aware of our own internal world and to be able to communicate that and set boundaries. So this is a really exciting session for us today. And yeah, let me just see. All right. Yeah, we're going. Just wanted to double check we're live. Okay.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so we're really happy to have you here, Carina. Thanks for coming.
No, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be part of it. I know Mindful Nurses, I saw some of your Wellness Wednesdays, and
Yeah,
I'm very, very honored to be part of it.
yeah, it's great to have you here. So before we get started, could you just tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background and what brought you into this work?
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like there are a lot of commonalities, Janelle, with yourself.
Yeah.
I worked as a nurse for about 10 years in Germany, most of the time as a head nurse at a stroke unit. And then I moved into communication and did an internship here in New York and fall in love with my now husband at this city. And now I'm in Brooklyn and did my MPH here at Columbia
Mhm.
University and went into the field of behavior change communication and communication trainings, working a lot with UNICEF, Ministry of Health, and then just feeling the urge to develop my own work. And I created my own consultancy, really focusing on bringing health professionals into their communication power.
Mhm.
And besides that, I teach now at Columbia myself, the MPH students, which is nice just to come back and see some familiar faces again. So that's in a
Yeah.
nutshell what I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's wonderful. Yeah, we definitely have a lot in common of working in this humanitarian aid world and working with healthcare providers. So it's great that you're doing your own work now and bringing your own offering to healthcare workers. And like I was saying before, this is so useful for the healthcare workers, the nurses, and the mindful nurses community. I think we don't really get a lot of training about communication skills. And
Right.
um, yeah.
Right. And, not just communication skills, but really like these different parts of communication and like the starting point of communication, which is being connected to yourself. And like I remember, I don't know, maybe you had similar experiences, but when I was a young nurse and I signed up for these communication trainings, I always went feeling like, okay, I do these couple of hours and then I come back and I'm going to be confident and persuasive. And that
Mhm.
never really worked that way.
Right.
Because a lot of it is just happening like on the mindset of like, okay, so you could change something, how you say something, but it's not really rooted in you. And
Mhm.
so, like, for me now, a big focus of my work is to just start there at like
Mhm.
self connection, self empathy, and then we go to self expression and
Mhm.
empathic listening. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah, not just coming from the mind, but something we're actually feeling and feeling confident inside of ourselves to
Hmm.
express. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
deeper work. Yeah.
Yeah. And so with the podcast, I just try to provide free, inspiring resources for health
Mhm.
professionals. And I thought about, how do you name that child? and
Mhm.
and like mindful communication for me really comes down to these three words of being connected and
Mhm.
being curious and taking
Mhm.
care. And
Hmm.
maybe you know that too. Like there are really days sometimes where you don't even have time to drink or eat, but you still
Mhm.
feel like you leave work and you have some energy left. And then there are days where it's not even that busy, but you just feel so drained and exhausted.
Mhm.
And for me, when I really reflected on it, it often was because I felt disconnected from
Mhm.
others, but also from myself. And
Mhm.
I just feel like, if we have this expectancy to connect with others,
Mhm.
let's start with us and connect with us. So that's where the
Mhm.
connection comes from. And then curious, it just changes a way how we approach a situation. If I'm
Mhm.
open-minded or if I come with a certain judgment, and this
Mhm.
judgment, I not just mean like towards others.
Mhm.
The inner critic is always ready to go.
Yeah.
um, and so that changes when I come with more curiosity
Mm.
and then care, just taking care of yourself and of others. And
Mhm.
yeah, that's where that comes from.
Yeah, beautiful. Those are beautiful three principles: connected, curious, and care. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Great. And you have some exercises for us today to
I
like dig into
do.
these principles so we can experience it live, right?
That
Yeah.
sounds great. Yeah. So because
Yeah.
I really thought about how can I make this session most useful. And
Mm-hmm.
I I just want to first of all say thank you to everybody that listens right now, for doing this tremendous work that I cannot imagine how stressful it is right now. The stress level I'm aware of or familiar with before as a nurse was more like a lot of emergencies at the same time, but not under a pandemic. And so I thought we could cover 3 strategies in mindful communication that help me a lot to keep energy. And that is doing some exercises around self connection and self empathy,
Mm-hmm.
and getting empathy from others and how that looks like, to kind of
Mm-hmm.
also be aware of like, well, that sounds nice, but it's actually not empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And then just doing some mini mindful moments that we can have anywhere, no matter how busy it is, and just something to take with us like in our backpack to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
beautiful.
with self connection, let's just start by saying it's a work in progress. It's not that you decide, okay, now I'm self connected and it's gonna
Mm-hmm.
work. And I think especially in that field of the health profession, we are so trained to function and be professional, and there is not a training on like, but how do you feel? And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can relate to that, but I did had a time in my career where I even felt like my feelings are a threat to
Mm-hmm.
how successful I can be as a nurse.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, a good nurse is not getting emotional or afraid or shows disgust or is hesitant. And so there was a time where I just decided, you know what, I just cut it off. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretending it's not there.
Yeah.
And that didn't go so well. And so, but it's a muscle that can come back. And so at the
Mhm.
beginning, when you start checking in with you, maybe you just tap into a few feelings, like the big ones, being sad, angry, happy. But then
Mhm.
after a while, it's like, you learn a language and you get a bigger vocabulary. And so you can dive
Mhm.
a little deeper. And so if you're up for it, and all of you that listen right now,
Mhm.
what I
Mhm.
was thinking is I'm going to give you a few sentences that you
Mhm.
probably hear on a regular basis. And I would invite you to just take them in, take a breath, and just feel like inside of you, like what comes up. Okay? And I'm going to guide you through it. But the
Okay.
first sentence I would like to give you is, why does this take so long? Why does this take so long? So when you hear that, what comes up for you?
Yeah, for me, I feel like some shame arising, like I've done
Mm,
something wrong. Maybe I'm being, yeah, criticized by a supervisor or something. So I feel like
mm,
a little bit of shame coming up.
mhm. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Is there a part in your body where the shame sits, where you can feel it, like a sensation?
Mm. Yeah, a little bit of like aching in my stomach and
Stomach?
kind of like
Yeah.
a like hunching contraction in my shoulders.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Mhm.
And is there something that matters so much to you that would explain what's going on in you right now? Like, is there a need of yours that you feel is really not met if someone says that sentence to you?
Mhm.
Do you have any sense?
I think the need is to be accepted and to be competent and um, yeah, appreciated.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
And supported.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Let me get you another sentence.
Mhm.
Janelle, you need to cover an extra shift this weekend.
That's a common one.
I didn't have to think hard of that one.
Yeah. What does that bring up? Yeah, there's like a feeling of responsibility and resentment.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of you who are listening, you can also type into the chat what this stuff is bringing up for you. Hi, Helen. Hey, Carly. Hey, Kate. Yeah, anyone who wants to participate live, you can type and I'll read out your reactions as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the resentment, is that living in you somewhere? Do you feel it in your body?
Mm. Um, yeah, I also feel it in my belly and my stomach and a little bit like in my face, like some tension in my face.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think is the longing here? Like, what is a need that is not met if I ask you to work another weekend?
Mm. Yeah, I think the need is like work-life balance and having time for myself and not being overstretched to give more than I have to give.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. And so with that exercise, what we do right now is we really listen to our body instead of moving on or instead of being reactive, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we take a moment to just be fully aware of what's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the whole purpose right now. Like I think that's important to notice, like, because one of the first reactions that I had when I started doing was like, I don't really want to go there. I mean, why would I even dive into this upsetting feeling right now? Let me just move on.
Mm-hmm.
But it is like a first step to just acknowledge the signals that the body is sending us to
Mm-hmm.
start connecting and communicating and get clarity on what's going on. Because then
Mm-hmm.
you can also think about a much clearer request to your supervisor who comes and asks you for doing another shift in terms of like saying, I understand you have to cover that, but I I'm really exhausted. I do have a big need for some recharging of my batteries this weekend. And you can be connecting your response to what's going on inside of you. And something that I find is helping me to be kinder to myself when I do these exercises is that it also allows us, first of all, to recognize what's going on. Like we can also say to ourselves, well, of course I am exhausted, or of course I feel embarrassed or ashamed because I do have a high need that I am respected in this team, or that I am belonging to this team. And it makes sense for us too then what's going on, because often we may be harsh and judge ourselves for why do I react like that? Why am I afraid? Why am I doubting myself? Why am I? And so that gives us an answer. And the answer in terms of like the needs that are not met is really universal, right? Like everybody wants to belong, and everybody wants to have a work-life balance. And that also makes it clear that you would not say to a friend, well, come on, it's not that important that you belong. And so why would we do that to us? It really allows us to fully recognize and accept what's going on for us.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that's so important. I think that it's so easy to criticize ourselves and not allow our emotions to be there, especially in the culture of the workplace where you feel like you have to just be tough and get the job done and not express
absolutely.
any emotion. So, yeah, it's really, I appreciate giving the attention to allowing ourselves to feel what we're feeling. And of course, we feel like we feel these are legitimate needs that we have. So it's nice
Yeah,
to remember
yeah.
that.
Janelle, there's one thing I just want to pick up on. I think
Mm-hmm.
one of the feelings you mentioned was being criticized. So let me just come back to that, because that's there's a little difference, right, between a feeling that's coming from you and an interpretation, which
Right.
might be right. It might be the case, but we don't know for sure.
Right.
So like if I say, oh, I'm attacked, or I'm ignored, or I'm neglected, what that does is it gives a lot of power to another person.
Right.
And it sets me up automatically to like, I'm getting defensive, or I'm helpless. And so that happens. That's totally normal. Like that's just
Yeah.
the language that we have. But it's whenever you have the feeling, you describe something that's going on where someone else is involved, just pause for a moment and see if there is something else that you could tap into, that would stay with you. Okay. But so these were two examples that cause more upsetting feelings. And I want to give you an example that may cause different feelings, because often the positive examples we also just like rush through. And so it's just as important that we also let that in and recharge on that. So I'm going to tell you, Janelle, I'm so glad you're here today and take care of my dad. I feel so calm when I know you are with him, because I know you really care.
Yeah, that feels good. It feels makes me feel happy and open and warm.
Warm in the belly.
Yeah, or in my heart, especially.
In your
In my
heart,
heart.
yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And can you also connect it to a need of yours that is met through that statement?
Yeah, the need is to be wanted and to be helpful, to be of service, to be useful.
Yeah. So whenever that happens, just make the space as well to take all of that in and carry it with you and really pause a moment and soak it all up.
Mm.
And then,
Yeah, such a good point. I think it's so easy to, I don't know why it's so hard for us to receive compliments, but it's so easy to just be like, oh, I didn't do anything. It's really
right.
nice practice just to allow ourselves to receive
Yeah.
gratitude. Yeah.
Now own it.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And so I think the benefits, if we start training this muscle and also giving ourselves the empathy of saying, well, of course I feel that way because I have that need that everybody has. It often gives us more choices how we want to communicate in a situation, because then I know what's going on and I can decide, okay, I want to express myself. I want to make a request. I want to listen and understand more from the other side, or I want to ask for a pause. And so it just becomes clearer of what way I want to go if I take that moment. Yeah, so that in a nutshell is like just self-connection and self-empathy. And yeah, next time you are hearing a certain sentence that you feel like triggers something, you can just ask yourself, oh, wait a minute, what is the feeling? Where do I have it? And what do I long for right now?
What is the feeling? Where do I have it? And what do I long for? Yeah, really good practice. Thank you.
Yeah, and then sometimes, self-empathy goes a long way, but then it's also good to get empathy from others, because sometimes our needs are not met, and that is a reality. And so then taking the time to also mourn about that and getting empathy if something is going on, can really help, especially in stressful times or when we feel like our energy bucket is already like in the red. And so with empathy, what I mean is, empathy is something that I don't like to say I show empathy, because showing something, I can pretend. And I would make the case that if you are giving empathy, then you don't just show it, you are empathy in that moment. And I see you have headphones. So if I use that as an analogy, if I would see you wearing your headphones and you maybe swing your body and I see you are having a good time, if I show interest, or if I have like an active conversation, I may look at you and I may say, oh wow, you seem to have like a really good time with your music. It seems like that band is really right up your alley. And with empathy, the difference would be that I would ask if I could have one of your earpods, and I would listen, and I would hear the music and the lyrics. I would understand it with my head, and I would feel the joy, and maybe I want to move to, and I can feel the rhythm in my belly. So it's really like an experience of like mind and heart and body. And so that's what makes it so hard sometimes to go there, because it also requires to go to places that might be dark. But it's such a gift if we can give it. I would say we not always are in a position to give empathy, and that's totally okay. I rather have someone say to me, Carina, I would love to give you empathy right now, but I feel like I'm not in a good spot to do that. Can we talk later? Or is there anything else I can do right now that would help you a little bit? And because it is a lot to ask for, we do have sometimes responses that are almost automatic, that we go to, that are well-meaning, but that are not empathy. And if you want to, and all of you, we can, like before, we can just go through a few examples of how that feels for you if I give you different responses that are not empathy, and then we're gonna do empathy. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay. So let's assume, Janelle, you and I, we have a shift together at the hospital, and you come to me in the middle of the shift, and you are visibly shaken, and you tell me, you know what, I just had a meeting with our supervisor, and I think she mentioned something about my work performance, and I don't know, I'm so confused and insecure, and I don't know what's going on really. And so I'm gonna give you a few possible responses.
Okay.
And you can just feel into it and see how they land and what you think the strategy is instead of empathy. Okay. So one possible response for me could be to say, well, I mean, you must have done something to kick her off. You know, maybe you are just not aware of it right now, but it reminds me of like what happened 2 weeks ago where you didn't see what's going on, and maybe it's just something like that. That's, you know, just think about it. Yeah. That's yeah.
Yeah, that lands as kind of like blaming, feeling blamed.
Yeah, 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 definitely. Just judging, and there must be a reason for it, right? Like, yeah. Or I could say, you know, you really should get it together. I mean, I think what you really have to do is go and attend a workshop to make sure you are up to date with all of your skills, and there's nothing she can criticize, and, you know, just really make an effort.
Yeah, that feels kind of like, I guess, just dismissing the feeling or the experience and trying to fix it maybe somehow.
Yeah, and also it almost sounds like I'm talking down to you, right? Like you need someone to tell you what to do, and yeah. And I could even take that a step further and say, okay, that's it. I'm gonna sign you up for a course, and you're gonna take it. Like I could completely take over and order.
Yeah, very disempowering.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I could also try to say, you know what, I think that's because in the last team meeting, when you spoke up, I think that really, she really didn't like that. And I think that's why she picks now on you. Like I could try to analyze something that I don't know, because I don't know what's going on in her head. Again, taking away from what's going on with you. Or I could make it all about me by saying, oh no, you know what, that's not even bad. I mean, remember how she criticized me in front of a patient the other time? I mean, that was bad. Like compare, like the challenge who's yeah. Then one that we sometimes use is sarcasm. Like I could say, oh, you know what, if they let you go, you don't have any night shift anymore. That would be great.
Right.
And then there are a few that really come across very supportive, like, well, Janelle, that's just not true. Like, you are such a good nurse, and everybody knows that. And deep down, she knows that too. Like, don't even worry about it. Or just sleep about it. Tomorrow, she already forgot about it. Like, it's not a big deal. or I could say, oh, wow, that's a really bad feedback. Oof. And so with all of that, it's so easy. And a lot of them are well-meaning. And a lot of them I catch myself doing. And I know which ones I jump to. Like, it's sometimes hard for me to not give advice. Or to not reassure. Like, that's like the first go-to. But did you feel understood the way how I talked to you?
No, yeah, like all of them were were dismissing of the feeling somehow, or trying to fix it, or trying to, all these different strategies, but none of them really making me feel heard or felt or seen. So
Right.
yeah, I definitely catch myself doing all of those as well. It's kind of painful just to be like, oh, I remember doing that.
I know, but that's the first step, just knowing about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think when we do that, what happens, it's like, maybe you felt there's something wrong with you, and you shouldn't be at that place because I try so hard to pull you out of there, right? Or maybe I even managed to pull you out of there by reassuring you, but that's going to last for 5 minutes. And then you need me again. And you feel like, well, I only feel good if someone else is reassuring me. And it's not really empowering you.
Yeah.
And so coming back to what we did earlier, tapping into feelings and needs, it's the same thing. Like, if we give empathy, we try to make guesses that really look into what's going on with you right now. And I may say, wow, you really look shaken. That conversation really took you by surprise. You didn't see that coming. And I don't know. I mean, let me know if that's correct. But I could sense that you're also disappointed that she doesn't see how hard you work and how important your work is to you. And is it fair when I say that you're almost nervous because you really want to belong to this team? Right? So, and of course you can always say like, oh, I don't think that's quite it. And we go back and forth, but by me just meeting you where you are and not where I want you to be somewhere else, also allows you to really tap into it and to just to be recognized and understood. And the beauty is that we don't have to fix, like, and maybe you notice that yourself, but when we are fully understood and heard, it already shifts how we experience something. And that can be the first step to heal and to mourn what's going on. So we don't, I think it also takes away some of this almost responsibility that we feel to help someone. If we are just there, that's all we need. And just show, hey, I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. I think it's when we're more comfortable with our own negative, or not negative, but we're more comfortable with our own challenging emotions, then we can feel less pressure to try to fix someone else's emotions and just allow them to be there and to be there with them. And yeah, it shifts so much just to be seen and heard and felt, like you were saying. So important to remember that, because it's very easy to go into those other responses of trying to fix things or change things.
And one very practical recommendation, if I may make it, is go and look for an empathy buddy. Because sometimes when we are at work, our colleagues may not always be the best place to unload, to get just like someone that is listening, because they have their own perspective and they know the place in and out. And so getting someone that is just there for empathy can be really helpful. Like I have 4 empathy buddies, oh,
Mhm.
or I cannot even say. I mean, it's 4 beautiful, wonderful women, um,
Uh-huh.
and we meet every other week or when we need it.
Mhm.
And we met at a training,
Mhm.
and we don't know anything about each other besides what we talk in our online meetings, and
Mhm.
it really makes a big difference for me having
Yeah.
that resource. And I mean, you already have such a beautiful community. I don't know,
Mhm.
maybe, in the chat function, if someone wants an
Mhm.
empathy buddy, just say, hey, I want an empathy buddy. And then maybe you
Yeah.
can find each other. And
Yeah.
it's really just about just connect, and you just decide on like, okay, we want to do it every week, every other week, an hour.
Mhm.
Everybody can share,
Mhm.
and get a reflection, and
Mhm.
you don't have to fix anything. You just be there,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
and that can make a big difference.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful offering. Thank you for suggesting that. And we'll definitely put it in the chat. I would love to see that happening. And how do you recommend that to happen? Like when you meet, I've been in some circles where it's like
Yeah,
each person gets 5 minutes to share and then the others just listen and don't respond at all? Or do
right.
you recommend for them to give some reflection or feedback? Or how do you
Yeah.
usually facilitate that?
So let's assume we're gonna go through a meeting. So
Hmm.
I would I would start with 60 minutes.
Okay.
And if you start, it might be helpful to just have one other person instead of a big group.
Mm-hmm.
So you can really focus on
Mm-hmm.
one person, and start by setting yourself an intention.
Mm-hmm.
So I will go in my empathy meeting and I would say to myself, I really hope for connection, or I wish for clarity, or
Mm-hmm.
for respect, or whatever it is that I feel like I would really love to have happening in that meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And then take a few minutes to just settle in, make a little chit
Mm-hmm.
chat,
Mm-hmm.
take a few breaths together, and then you can decide who's gonna start. And
Mhm.
usually we have like a minimum of 15 minutes per
Okay.
person.
Mhm.
You can make that longer. Start with
Mhm.
15 minutes and see how it feels. And
Mhm.
then it depends, right, on everybody's style. And sometimes it's a little different each time, but
Mhm.
um, you share, the other person listens, and you can interrupt and say, would you like me to reflect that to you? Would you like
Okay.
me to make a guess about how you are feeling right now? Or
Mhm.
you could say, you know what, just hearing you talk, I can feel my belly getting tense. How is that for
Mm.
you? Or,
Mhm.
and just, you can always say, no, not right now. I feel like I just want to download everything I have
Mhm.
on my chest. Um, and then afterwards, when you shared everything and you got empathy, you can, the other person is asking, is
Mhm.
there anything else? Would you share something else, or are you complete, to really make sure the first
Mhm.
round is complete? And then
Mhm.
you can afterwards also check in, like, how was it to get
Mhm.
empathy? How was it to give empathy? Was there
Mhm.
one thing that was a little easier, more accessible to me? Did something
Mhm.
shift inside of me?
Mhm.
And just reflect together on how it
Mhm.
was, and try to be specific. um,
Mhm.
Instead of saying you gave such good empathy, maybe just be specific. And you can say, when you reflect on when you reflected back on how I really long for respect, that really gave me some clarity. And so that helps the other person then to also
Yeah.
see what landed, what didn't land, um,
Mhm.
and then go from there. If
Yeah.
you
Beautiful.
if you urgently feel like you have an advice, just ask before you give it. You can
Yeah.
just say, I would have an idea, but are you open for an advice? And
Mhm.
otherwise just keep it at empathy.
Yeah. Great. Oh, that sounds wonderful. Definitely we'll share that with the group. That would be great to see
Yeah,
that
I
practice
would love to
spreading.
see some
Thank you.
groups popping up.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be great. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so then that really leaves me with the third strategy that I spoke about,
Mhm.
which is these mini mindful moments. And
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know how it is for you, but when I started with
Mhm.
mindfulness practice, I sometimes felt almost like overwhelmed of like, oh my God, it's the pillow and me for 40 minutes. What are we gonna do?
Yeah.
Um, and especially if we are in a hectic environment or going through a stressful time, um, that might feel a lot. And
Mhm.
so having these mini moments that we can also use whenever we need it and throughout the
Mhm.
day, for me
Mhm.
made a big difference. And so I just want to share three of those that you can just
Mhm.
start using whenever you want. And the first is that you pick one activity
Mhm.
that you know you're going to do a couple times throughout your day or your shift at the hospital. So that could be you take the stairs, or you prepare an IV fluid, or
Mhm.
you drink water.
Mhm.
Try to pick only one for the beginning, and try to pick one where it's less likely that people ask you a lot of questions, or you are a lot of interactions.
Mhm.
And whenever you catch yourself being in that moment doing that activity, just try to be fully there, like fully
Mhm.
present. Like think about really like, okay, so where am I? What's my body doing? What are my hands doing? How
Mhm.
is my breath? Do I hear something? What's the temperature?
Mhm.
And just notice how it feels for you to be present
Mhm.
and and connected to
Mhm.
to you in that moment, and fully
Mhm.
aware of what you're doing, getting out of this automatic
Mhm.
um, hamster wheel.
Yeah.
So that's one.
Yeah.
Um, do you have an activity in mind that would fit for you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, those are so good just to integrate short practices that we can do throughout the day and not make mindfulness like a whole extra thing to add onto the schedule, but just when we
Yeah.
need it to have
Hmm.
short things. Yeah, all of those sound good for me. I really like breathing, just taking like 3 deep breaths, or like even just 5 minutes breathing slow deep breaths, like extending the exhale, just breathing
Hmm.
into my belly, just really long slow deep breaths into my belly really helps me to
Right.
calm down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Hmm.
And then you can also set an anchor if you're in a
Mm.
conversation.
Hmm.
Um, and so with anchor, it could be the breath that's very available to a lot of us, or it could be that I think about my midline, like where am I in my center, or I could think about my gravity and
Hmm.
feel like my sit bones, or um, where I feel heavy.
Hmm.
And so when we are in conversations with someone, it's almost like a dance of the presence, right? Like we go from us to the other person. And so an anchor sometimes just helps to stay there in the
Hmm.
moment,
Hmm.
and to then look back and be like, okay, so how did that go? Like, did I connect with me? Did I connect with the other person? Was there one that was more accessible to me? And you don't have to do that with every conversation. That would be a lot.
Hmm.
But sometimes, and you remember it, just like if you go in a conversation, try to get more presence by just having this anchor and
Hmm.
responding back to that.
Hmm.
And then the third one you also mentioned, which is just like taking 2 minutes of
Hmm.
breathing and
Hmm.
just finding, and this is probably the hardest part on it, just finding a corner where someone will give you 2 minutes. And for me, that was sometimes the storage room or the
Hmm.
restroom or whatever you find.
Hmm.
And all you do is really just like lower your gaze. Closing the eyes is sometimes a little hard if you are in a work environment, but just like lowering the
Hmm.
gaze and taking 2 rounds of 10 deep breaths, and like
Hmm.
really feeling how the air comes in through the nostril and tickles in the throat and fills up your lung until nothing fits and your belly expands and you exhale it all. And what happens often is that our mind is still working and it's gonna say hi. And when that happens, just, welcome it and smile at it and acknowledge it with like, oh yeah, there is a planning thought. Okay, planning thought, I'm gonna come back to you, but now I'm gonna breathe. Or, oh yeah, that happened with a colleague before. Well, that's a great thought, but not now. Now I'm just gonna breathe. And that's all. Like, you don't always need longer periods of time to feel more present and connected. And if you carve out these tiny moments, it can make a big difference at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, it doesn't have to be extra stress to add something onto our schedule. It's just something we can use in the moment. And yeah, super practical and simple.
Yeah. And it,
Thank you for that.
it doesn't mean that there is no yoga when you are off or whatever is good for you, like taking walks in nature or whatever you do. But I like to have something in my backpack when I know I'm going to be at a stressful place, and I don't need anything. I can just do it. And
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for these super practical and useful and thoughtful and deep practices that you've shared with us today. It's so important to get to the root of how we're feeling inside and to be able to have that self-awareness and self-love and acceptance to allow ourselves to feel whatever we're feeling and acknowledge it and appreciate ourselves and and then from that place to be able to express and make request for what we need. I feel like this is such a cornerstone of addressing burnout, to be able to feel our feelings and express them, because it's kind of one of the ways we go into burnout is just numbing to ourselves and until it reaches the point where we break. So bringing this awareness is so good.
Yes, and just this inner voice that becomes less a critic and more a friend and a supporter.
Yes.
And
Yes.
Mm.
Oh, well, I feel very warm and nurtured by this session. Thank you so much for sharing with us. And I'm really excited to share this empathy group with the community as well, and to see if that starts to pop up. That's be a great practice
People
and a
find
great
each other.
idea. Yeah, it's so nice.
That would be great. And let me know if anybody has more questions. I'm happy to help or answer. The second exercise we did with the empathy and the automatic responses that we often have. I developed a little cheat sheet to just see like the differences of responses, and that's on Instagram. On my there's like a link tree, so you can download that if you're interested.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. And we'll be sharing Carina's information on the website with the recording, the link to the YouTube where you can access this recording, and also the link to her website where you can get all the information you need, like this resource she just shared, and follow up with her as well. If anyone wants to do any one-on-one work with her, feel free to reach out.
Or just say hi.
Or just say hi. Yeah. And join the podcast, right? You have your podcast, Connected Curious Care. Is that every week on your website, or?
Yes. That is every week. I did took a few weeks of a break for a lot of going on in personal life, but I am working on the next one right now, which will come out next Wednesday. So
beautiful. Yeah, looking forward to tuning into those too. Thank you so much for your time, Carina. Really appreciate
thank you. It was a pleasure. Okay.
Really nice. And thanks everyone for joining. And stay tuned. Every week we're having these events every Wednesday. Wellness Wednesdays live at 9 p.m. on the East Coast and 6 p.m. on the West Coast. So stay connected, stay in touch, and be well, everyone. Thank you. Have a good evening, good day. wherever you are. Bye.